Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Janine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. This is the biggest cover-up since Watergate, a story no one wants to talk about. He didn't protect your sons so he could protect his presidency and the wannabe future presidency of his then Secretary of State. He didn't protect your sons, choosing instead to protect the feelings of those in the Muslim world. This week, Ben Rhodes' White House email is the Benghazi smoking gun. Susan Rice was prepped to say the so-called protests were rooted in an internet video so as not to show a broader failure of policy. Now, we've impeached a president for lying about sex with an intern. A president has resigned in the face of certain impeachment for covering up a burglary. Why wouldn't we impeach this president for not protecting and defending Americans in the bloodbath known as Benghazi? Fact: an ambassador is sent to an insecure facility that doesn't comply with minimum standards in a designated danger zone. The CIA warns of numerous al-Qaeda training camps in Benghazi. Our ambassador sends repeated emails and emergency cables for more security. Fact: it was the anniversary of 9/11. Whistleblower Greg Hicks calls Washington to advise that Ambassador Stevens said that he and the Benghazi consulate were under attack. General Carter Ham tells Washington that our consulate is under siege and our ambassador may be a hostage. Fact: everyone in Washington knew what was going on based on the drones, the satellites, the audio, the real-time phone calls. They attacked with heavy artillery and rocket-propelled grenades. Fact: it was a tight presidential race. Barack Obama campaigning as a war hero, a real commander-in-chief, claiming al-Qaeda was on its heels. But Obama loses all credibility if the nation thinks al-Qaeda destroyed our consulate and has killed 4 Americans, including our ambassador. So the conspiracy about a grotesque video begins. Former CIA Director Mike Morrell removes the word Islamist in describing the extremists. He takes out references to the previous CIA warnings of an al-Qaeda attack. Fact: the Joint Chiefs and Defense Secretaries say troops couldn't get there in time to save our men on the ground.
There was not enough time, given the speed of the attack, for armed military assets to respond.
The fiction begins. It wasn't al-Qaeda. It was an anti-Muslim American-made video. Before our eyes, the terrorists become the victims, and the American victims become irrelevant. The president repeats the fiction on The View, on David Letterman, at the UN.
The future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam.
You even take an ad out to apologize to the Muslim world.
Since our founding, the United States has been a nation that respects all faiths. We reject all efforts to denigrate the religious beliefs of others. But there is absolutely no justification to this type of senseless violence. None.
In fact, to add insult to injury, you condemn anyone who says something negative about Islam. Mr. President, it's not about them, it's about us. You represent us. You're supposed to protect us. And instead of condemning the terrorists, you criticize free speech. I don't even think you believe in the First Amendment. And you're certainly not a man of your word.
There should be no doubt that we will be relentless in tracking down the killers and bringing them to justice.
Really? May 2014, and you still haven't brought anyone to justice. And the absurdity of your claim that spontaneous demonstrators actually brought rocket-propelled grenades to protest a video is belied by your own words yesterday.
The notion that this is some spontaneous uprising in eastern Ukraine is belied by all the evidence of well-organized, trained, armed militias with the capacity to shoot down helicopters. Generally, local protesters don't possess that capacity of surface-to-air missiles or whatever weapons were used to shoot down helicopters.
Wow. Here we are 20 months later, and it takes a judge's order to force the release of emails that the president wouldn't produce to an equal branch of government, there specifically to check and balance the president's office. And tonight, in an exclusive justice interview, we find out that even those documents may have been tampered with. It appears that the conspiracy was so vast, the intent to obstruct the truth so uniform, that documents were withheld. The cover-up is classic. And the sad part is no one, including you, Mr. President, will tell us if you issued the cross-border authority to protect and defend Americans. Mr. President, it's called an abrogation of duty. You have not taken your oath to honestly and faithfully execute the duties of your office. As Commander-in-Chief, you have not protected us. This dereliction of duty as Commander-in-Chief demands your impeachment. Your cover-up was for political advantage. The promotion thereafter of virtually everyone involved in your conspiracy, and the stonewalling of Congress, the denying of access to key witnesses, all add up to a classic cover-up. And what's that? You were elected? There is no contract with someone who thinks that the American people are nothing more than pawns in an all-consuming power play to change who we are as a nation. You swore to protect and defend the American people, but instead you left Americans to die, not lifting a finger to help them. Mr. President, none of us want to believe that our president would let Americans die, but the arrogance, the failure to act, the lies, the cover-up make it clear that you, Mr. President, have defrauded the American people. You, Mr. President, have violated your constitutional oath. You have not faithfully executed your duties in the office of the president. And that's my open. With me now, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN and Fox News contributor John Bolton. Good evening, Ambassador.
Glad to be with you, Judge.
All right. What does the latest information that we just found out on the Ben Rhodes email tell you?
Well, I think there can't be any doubt at all now that we've got an administration that's absolutely consumed with the potentially devastating political effect on the president's re-election campaign of this attack in Benghazi. It belies their whole narrative that the president himself had just said a few days before that Osama bin Laden is dead, General Motors is alive, the war on al-Qaeda is almost over. Everything, all the tragic events of that evening of September the 11th undercut that. And so the combination of ideology and political reality drive to this cover-up. And there can't be any argument anymore that's what it is. That's why we need more information. We've got a lot that's come out because of this FOIA request. There's a lot more there. There's no doubt about it.
Well, what should happen? I mean, you know, now that we have this email that, by the way, should have been handed over to the Congressional Oversight and Reform Committee and wasn't. They stonewalled just as they did in Fast and Furious. But now that Judicial Watch, and we're going to speak to someone from Judicial Watch, has gotten that email, we expect that many more will be coming. What happens for not handing out this information? Is there a sanction, or do we just say, oh, that's the way it's done?
Well, I think it's going to be hard to impose penalties on the people who did it. I think really now the way ahead lies in the House Select Committee that Speaker Boehner has announced he will appoint, because the Select Committee's got to pursue this investigation in ways that really get to the bottom of things. The public hearings that get so much attention are the last things that should happen. We need former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton up giving hours and hours of depositions before they put her back out in public testimony. That's the way to find out what happened. You can't get effective investigations done by members of Congress alternating asking questions for 5 minutes for somebody who's articulate and knows how to dodge questions. You need to know what you and I know as lawyers has to happen to them, of extensive hour after hour depositions.
Well, there's no question, and we need someone who knows how to question a witness, and you know, this handing off the witness to the next person just allows the witness to, you know, continue to talk without answering the question. But Ambassador, this administration continues to spin and mock the investigation to get to the bottom of Benghazi. I mean, you know, I think it was yesterday Pelosi saying Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. You held a position that Susan Rice held when she told the world that the Benghazi massacre was a result of a video. How is a prep session conducted? How does it work when you were there in the same position?
Well, I didn't do prep sessions because I was never asked to speak to an issue that was completely outside my jurisdiction. Look, being UN ambassador is a fine job. Susan Rice had absolutely nothing to do with Benghazi, and I think she was selected to go on the 5 Sunday talk shows because, by definition, she couldn't make a mistake. Since she didn't know anything, she couldn't reveal anything that she shouldn't have. And this really poses, I think, a critical point. Where was Secretary of State Hillary Clinton on those 5 talk shows? This was her post that was attacked, her people who were killed. She was out there issuing a press release while the attack was going on, blaming it on the video. She was there at Andrews Air Force Base when the remains were brought back, blaming it on the video, and yet 2 days later, she can't go on the Sunday talk shows. There's a story there, and I think it could reveal a lot about what was going on inside the administration.
And, you know, the Accountability Review Board that she says was going to investigate what happened in Benghazi, that never even questioned her, made up of her husband's, several of their friends, it really makes it clear that there was no intention to hold her accountable because no one bothered to question her.
Yeah, well, I think within the administration there was panic across the State Department, the White House, and other agencies because they could see the political ramifications. And the ARB, you know, has a very limited mandate. It's useful for what it does in some cases, but it was never a full investigation. And for the Washington Press Corps to buy the argument that that was the answer is just disgraceful. Not one of a long list of disgraces, but disgraceful.
All right, Ambassador Bolton, always good to get your take. Thanks for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, and coming up, the Benghazi truth leaks out. And vote in tonight's Instapoll. Should the president be impeached for his administration's handling of the Benghazi attacks? Facebook or tweet me at Judge Janine.